Ocean's 8 is the next installment of the Ocean's 11 film series made by Steven Soderbergh back in the day, which is of course a remake of the Rat Pack film of the same name. This one is not made by Steven Soderbergh, however, because he was making Logan Lucky and then Unsane back to back, so of course he can't make it, so we have Gary Ross, director of the first Hunger Games film and Free State of Jones, behind the camera. And this film has an all-female cast led by Sandra Bullock as Debbie Ocean, sister of George Clooney's Danny Ocean. She, similarly to George Clooney in Ocean's 11, gets recently released from prison. She's on parole, but she can't get in contact with any criminals of any kind or try to do any more crime. So what does she do? Immediately starts to plan a heist and gets all of her culprit friends together to try to steal a necklace from the Met Gala around the neck of Daphne Kluger, played by Anne Hathaway. And I won't say anything else from there, because from then on out you get the typical Ocean style of heist planning and then heisting and then twists and turns. I was interested to see this movie. I didn't think it was going to be a Ghostbusters situation, and if you've seen my review, I was kind of fair on it, and I don't really believe in that anymore. Ghostbusters is trash. It's a commercial disaster from start to finish. Like, not even just like movie start to finish, like production start to production finish. I didn't think this movie was going to be like that, because this was actually going to be a sequel. It was actually going to be like a passing of the baton in a sense, because the character of Debbie Ocean is related to Danny Ocean, so it was going to be like a trade-off kind of feel, and I kind of like that, instead of just completely getting rid of that. But at the same time, I wanted that, but I also wanted this film to feel unique. I wanted it to be its own thing, and I didn't really want it to have similar plot beats to the original Ocean's trilogy. And I did walk out of this film feeling entertained. If you want to know how I feel about the Ocean's 11 trilogy made by Soderbergh, 12 is entertaining for me, but not as good as 13, and 13 is really good, but not as good as Ocean's 11. I'd say Ocean's 8 is better than 12. I don't think it really compares to 13 or 11 that much, but it's still a fun watch, to say the least. But it's kind of like Solo again. This is kind of a similar review to Solo, I guess, because I kind of got what I expected, and I didn't really get much fresh or new out of the film. There are certain things that are new, but only really because the characters aren't the same. Like, the characters obviously weren't in the other Ocean's movies, so obviously they aren't going to have the exact same storylines, and also the heist of the Met Gala is different than a Las Vegas casino, so obviously there's going to be differences there. But as far as plot beats and certain scenes, there are certain moments that feel completely ripped right out of the original Ocean's 11 film. So that was a little disappointing, that this film, besides from a few things here and there, couldn't really stand on its own a whole lot. And a lot of this film, plot-wise, feels a little dry to me, at least before they got to the initial heist. Once the heist starts, that's when the movie gets into its fun Ocean style of filmmaking that I really enjoyed. Is Gary Ross exactly like Steven Soderbergh with his direction? No. He tries, but it's obvious that he's no Soderbergh, but still, it's an entertaining filmmaking style that I enjoyed. The music was really good too, and the cast, they're really charming in it, and it's hard just not to enjoy a heist in a movie if it's cleverly written, and I think the twist that they took in the heist sequence, I think they actually nailed it in the screenwriting there. Now, everything before that, though, is where it gets a little problematic for me. Now, the cast, very good. They did a very good job doing what they had to do. However, I'd say they ranged from very good to solid, and they fit their roles for what they had to do. I do have my issues with certain characters, but I'll get into that in a moment. On the whole, I thought they were fun together, and I thought they all had good chemistry with each other. It's just that for the longest time, you feel like they're trying to do what Steven Soderbergh did with Ocean's 11, where these characters are all trying to be cool together while planning this heist, but they also want to keep you invested as well, and I didn't really feel as invested in the lead-up for Ocean's 8. Now, there are certain things going on that are interesting because the actors are there and they're doing a good job elevating this material that, to be fair, isn't really up to par with their standards. But I was still having fun seeing them on screen, but I can't deny that I was just the slightest bit disengaged for the longest period of time. It doesn't help that this movie doesn't really have that humor that the original Ocean's 11 had, where it was able to keep you entertained before they actually got to the heist. And in this film, the jokes didn't really hit for me. I wouldn't say fall flat on their face. This isn't like Ghostbusters. Again, not like Ghostbusters where it's embarrassing. But it wasn't like the Ocean's 11 kind of humor where everyone's just very cool and sly with each other. But they're still acting cool and sly in this movie. It's just, none of it really worked for me. It's hard to explain but there's just something that's really off, and maybe it was the fact that Soderbergh wasn't really penning the script or directing the film, but whatever the case may be, I can't deny that I did feel a little disengaged for the majority part of that first half, and it could also be because the first half, with the character introductions, it feels very underwritten. Like Sandra Bullock, she has a very good arc potential here, and they go through the arc, and by the end of it, you're like, alright, good for her. But I couldn't deny that when they started to bring up the arc a little bit more near the middle of the film, I was just kind of like, okay, I feel like this isn't really hitting as much, and when we get to the end of her arc later on, I was just kind of like, I feel like this could have hit a little bit more, and it's a really good arc, but I just don't really feel like it was fully realized in the script. However, Sandra Bullock, I still liked her. She has a very good charm to her. I think she works very well with Cate Blanchett as well, who also does a very good job in this film. She might be my favorite character in this film, except if it weren't for Anne Hathaway as Daphne Kluger. I thought she was phenomenal. Her character in this film is the superstar who is very full of herself and very not caring of anyone else. She has that rich douchebag kind of personality, and I thought she was great. I thought she really killed it, and I thought her character, I liked seeing where she went. But then we get to a character like Mindy Kaling, who doesn't really have that much to do in this film. Now, once again, like I said earlier, the performances range from very good to just solid, and they fill what they have to do. Mindy Kaling, unfortunately, just kind of fills for what she has to do, and she's solid for that. Like, she's fine. Like, I wasn't annoyed by her, but I also didn't really find her all that memorable, except for one scene, but it's only because that one scene felt like it was shoehorned in there for God knows what reason. Like, there's a Tinder scene in this movie, and when the scene was done, I was like, okay, how's that gonna lead into the rest of the plot? I don't think it ever did, though, and I was so astonished. I was like, okay, but how's this gonna come into play later? And I don't think it ever did. I was so confused when the movie ended. It honestly did just really feel like, oh, Mindy Kaling and Awkwafina, they don't really have that much to do, so we're gonna stick them in this kind of funny Tinder scene, but it's not really that funny because what's the relevance? How does it fit? It just didn't really do it for me. And Awkwafina, I was worried for her the most out of anyone. Of course Rihanna, but I was mostly worried about Awkwafina, and she didn't annoy me, thank God, but she didn't really say anything funny either. I wasn't really laughing at any of the jokes being told, like my range was just like smile, maybe chuckle a bit, but I wasn't really laughing in that first half before they get to the heist. And even Rihanna, I was worried about her. She is fine, thank God, but that could be because, one, she doesn't have a lot of speaking lines in this film. She's in the film enough, but she just doesn't speak a whole lot, and she is more of a stoner, more like loner kind of character, so she does deliver her lines in a naturalistic, dry way. So that was very good that they were able to craft a good performance out of Rihanna's limited range. But like I said, you have this one character that you're like, alright, that's really good, like I like how you fit into the story. Then you get to Sarah Paulson, who I also really like as an actress. I really admire her, especially on American Horror Story. But in this movie, she does really good, but her story is just, I'm a mom who does a lot of heists, and my family doesn't really notice it all that much, and by the end of the film, there's really not that much going on with her other than she is interacting with the plot a bit, and I was like, alright, I like you as an actress, but there's still just not a whole lot there. And in Ocean's 11, it's not like the entire cast had like deep characters or anything, because that's not what I'm asking for, but I'm just saying that this film is like stacked up with A-list actors who you kind of expect a lot more of, but you're not really getting that much. Because in Ocean's 11, at the time, it was just George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, and kind of Bernie Mac, who are the more standout ones that you would recognize immediately, and everyone else, you kind of knew them, but it's not like you were really expecting that much from them to begin with. You have Ocean's 8 here, where it seems like you get all these A-list stars to, like, play these great characters, and they're just kind of solid. Like, they do what they have to do as far as character goes. And I thought that was a little disappointing, as entertaining as their performances are, but it's really just because I know them as actors. Like, for instance, Helena Bonham Carter's character is someone who is much smaller compared to the Sandra Bullock or the Cate Blanchett, but they give her a story that makes you go like, okay, for a smaller character like you are, this storyline actually kind of helps me like you a little bit more, and the performance also works. Okay, I'm not disappointed by this character. And like I said, no disrespect to the actresses Mindy Kaling or Awkwafina or Sarah Paulson, but I just couldn't feel like there was much more going on with them other than they set up certain things, but it just didn't really feel like any of that mattered as the film was continuing to go on. But like I said, when you get to the heist sequence, that's when everything gets into full Ocean's filmmaking style, and I loved it. It's very fun. I can't help but love these heist sequences. They're really good. It's not Steven Soderbergh. Gary Ross tries to do Steven Soderbergh stuff. Is Gary Ross the next Steven Soderbergh? No. Like, you can tell this isn't a Soderbergh movie, but it is good for what it had to be in this film. So Gary Ross, I think, did a solid job with the directing of this movie. And also, after the heist sequence, like once the heist sequence is kind of done, the movie is still going on, and they introduce a new character played by James Corden. And when he showed up, I was like, oh my god, I'm actually laughing now. Like, I'm not chuckling anymore. Like, I'm actually, like, kind of smiling more. And that was the weirdest part for me. It was at that point when I was watching the movie, when James Corden showed up, where I was like, oh my gosh, before the heist, the humor was incredibly dry, but James Corden shows up, all of a sudden he's livening everything up. All of a sudden I thought the humor was much better. And I was just thinking, like, how come this movie couldn't have this kind of humor in the beginning half? Because in the beginning half, before the heist, there's like, it's just very dry and there's like really no memorable joke. But when James Corden entered in, I was like, he's actually telling some very memorable lines and he's actually making an impression on me. Like, I actually like his character. And then I kind of instantly remember, like, you know what? Anne Hathaway was kind of like that in the first half. Maybe that's why I liked her so much in that first half, because she was adding a little bit more oomph and charisma to what she was saying, like James Corden was here, and everyone else was trying to be so sly and cool that it didn't really always hit when they told a joke, you know what I mean? I'm afraid that none of this makes any sense and that I'm rambling at this point, but forgive me if that is the case. But what I'm kind of trying to drive at here is that there's only a few characters that really fully embrace what their characters are and how they are in this Ocean's film, and they fully embrace the Ocean spirit, and everyone else feels either underdeveloped or just kind of there because we need that kind of person there. That's kind of how I feel about the antagonist of this film. Now, I'll give this movie credit. It actually attempted to have an antagonist, unlike Logan Lucky. That's another heist film by Soderbergh that I had fun with, but my main problem with that was that there was no opposing force trying to get into their way, like Andy Garcia in Ocean's 11 or Al Pacino in Ocean's 13. This movie has at least an antagonist that they introduce, but doesn't really do anything at all to stop these girls, you know what I mean? Like, they introduce this antagonist, and there's like a bit of mystery, like what's going on here. Several scenes later, we finally get the backstory laid out to us, like what's going on with this antagonist, and then the antagonist is around, but it's not like they're aware of what's actually going on, like they're never made aware, and then the movie just kind of ends with them in this one spot, and I was like, I feel like this would be much more satisfying if this antagonist was actually like Andy Garcia or Al Pacino, like actually aware of the situation, trying to stop them, and the Ocean's team is trying to think of new ways to outsmart them and continue the heist as it was going before. But there really isn't anything like that, so this movie is missing a lot of the suspense that I really liked in Ocean's 11 and 13. And it's fun to see these actresses kind of smirk at each other and have that cool score going on in the background and cool cinematography and really nice outfits. Everyone's wearing colorful and beautiful dresses and suits and all that. But what's really missing from this heist is the suspense. And aside from a few moments where you're like, oh, how are they gonna get out of this one? But oh, they got out of it. Aside from a few moments like that, a few close calls, there's no real threat behind those close calls. There's no bigger threat like a Garcia looming in. It's just, oh, we gotta outsmart this thing real quick? Alright, got it. Keep going. Overall, though, I thought this movie was entertaining. Like I said, the cast, they all work very well together, and I didn't really think anyone was really lacking. My favorites were definitely James Corden and Anne Hathaway. Sandra Bullock and Cate Blanchett also do a very good job. Even though I thought the other women were very good, their characters just felt a little bit underdeveloped for me, and for the A-list stars that they are, I kind of wanted a little bit more for them in this film, and I was a little disappointed that they didn't have that much to work with. And I also thought the humor could have been much better in that first half, and I thought that was kind of making me feel disengaged, was that the charm felt like it was attempting to be there, but without the Soderbergh flair. You have someone writing the script and behind the camera attempting to be a Soderbergh, trying to get you back into the Soderbergh-esque feeling world, but because it's not exactly Soderbergh, you're feeling very disengaged from it. Like, I want to like this, but there's something about it I'm kind of off on. I really also wish that this film could stand on its own, like be its own unique thing, And it does attempt to do that at a couple parts, but there are also things that are just very familiar to the original Ocean's film that kind of left me disappointed. I'm gonna give Ocean's 8 a B-. I did not hate this film at all. Like I said, very similar to how I feel about Solo. The cast was very good, the heist sequence was a lot of fun, music was good, James Corden and Anne Hathaway really brought it and really killed it and were the standouts for me. And there are moments where the humor got much better later on. Cinematography is good, costume design, excellent in my eyes, for them being at the Met Gala, of course. But this movie does have certain issues before the heist that kind of lower my grade a bit and would kind of hinder my rewatchability of this film. I do think it's more rewatchable than Ocean's 12. That movie, as fun as that one can be, just not as good as the other films. I think Ocean's 8 is definitely better, but I think it is really lacking a lot of the charm that Soderbergh brought to 11 and 13. Still watchable though. But if you've seen Ocean's 8, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.